Welcome to the Coming Home Well podcast, the show that educates, supports, and advocates for the veteran community. Your host, Dr. Tyler Piron, U.S. Army retired, will bring you exciting conversations with amazing guests about resources, research, and military history, all geared to helping our warriors to come home well. Here's your host, Dr. Tyler Piron.
Welcome back to Coming Home Well. I am Tyler Piron, and I want to talk to you a little bit about veteran services. Oh, that's such a surprise. We have a great guest to talk about, well, sort of people that fall through the cracks. And you're going to be like, well, everybody falls through the cracks sometimes, and that's absolutely true. But we have Damia December. She is the program director for Veterans Rebuilding Life. And I'm not going to steal her thunder. I'm not going to tell you all about this great organization. But we were talking, and I said, let's have you on the show. Tell us all about the things that you do, why you do them, and how you do them. If you've listened to the program before, you know the drill. I let the guests talk after because, I like to talk. And so I have to restrain myself sometimes. Damia, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
So let's talk about the organization a little bit. What do you do?
Yeah, perfect. So as was just said, my name is Damia. I'm the program director for Veterans Rebuilding Life. We are a 501c3 nonprofit based here in New York City. We service veterans throughout the state of New York. However, our motto is to never turn a veteran away. And very often I'll get calls from out of state. We will find the resources for whoever is in need in front of us and carry that to fruition until we are confident that that need is met. We offer direct impact services. So what that means is for the folks who fall through the cracks, often in programs that receive grant funding, they have to spend their money in a very specific way. We are completely volunteer. We're completely grassroots. And when a person comes in front of us and says, I don't have housing, or I'm stuck in this very difficult position, we make sure to find the resources, or if we can, provide them ourselves to meet that very specific need. So we also offer a comprehensive reintegration program called Project 360. It's also a criminal involvement prevention program. Essentially what Project 360 is a veteran comes through and we want to address any need in all aspects of their well-being. So often we found with other services, other programs. So our program and our organization was built by veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan. And what they found was that there are just unmet needs, and that the needs that were being met in isolation in other organizations. So Project 360 was created to understand that a person is an entire whole complex system of networks within themselves and external themselves. And that by addressing the person rather than the unique problem, what we found is that the entire system is supported, and that in addition to very specifically involving veterans in community service and humanitarian service was key to suicide prevention. So our Project 360 program takes veterans through three main phases. The first phase addressing physical health, mental health, and health benefits registration. The second phase addressing employment and an education, goals, family networks, and then the third phase addressing meaning and life purpose. So veterans are paired with a peer mentor to carry them through the entire program process. And at the end of the program, veterans are given the opportunity to give back, either by becoming a peer mentor themselves or by identifying a humanitarian project abroad or a local community service project that they're inspired by, that gives them passion that they can get involved with. So we do this on small scale. So not every veteran who comes through our doors wants to do the entire Project 360 program, but we also do it in a long-term scale. So we try to be flexible to meet every need really that comes through our door.
You touched on something I find very fascinating and very accurate. There's a lot of organizations out there, and they all tend to focus on a thing. And it's hard to do that holistic, hey, we're going to help you in everything you need.
Yeah.
Do you partner with other organizations to get those one-offs, or, how do you do that?
Absolutely. That's a really great question because, again, being small and grassroots means we don't have infinite resources. So those community partnerships are absolutely essential. But what we found is that even other organizations that do have community partnerships will toss a vet and then they're done. And we don't do that. We carry through. We say, okay, we do partner with Beacon House, who has actual veteran housing available in the 5 boroughs and in Long Island and upstate New York. They might have a bed. So we call that case manager. We also call the VA to get them benefits registration, and we follow up to make sure they are in their programs. We pair them with a mentor so that they have someone consistent to be connected with through that whole process. So that's really, I think, the key element that allows us to be holistic, is that we're saying we're going to be your partner through the process, your home base to come back to check in with if you feel like you got lost anywhere along the way.
You know, when I was in service, one of the most fascinating things that I observed from a sociological perspective is if I went to finance, or, as a soldier, I needed something from supply or something, it was always much more difficult. But if I went on behalf of one of my soldiers, I got things done. It, like, the dynamic changes for some reason when you're advocating for someone else. And out of service, it works the exact same way. And I don't know why that is. I maybe I should look into that, but it's something that I observed about human nature. If you have someone with you that's sort of advocating on your behalf, things just happen a lot better, faster, and easier.
Absolutely. I think that there's something to be said about the power of service, the power of giving. And when we notice another person giving on behalf of another person, it inspires us to be more giving ourselves, right? And I think this is a real core element, not just for how we interact as human beings, but specifically with suicide prevention. That's the key element of our suicide prevention program, is this meaning and life purpose. Life is meaningless on some level if you're not giving. And that is all the more apparent for our veterans who have had that as a huge part of their life for at least 5-6 years for the beginning part, if not 20 years, 25 years, 30 years for other of our folks, where you are a part of this larger system. Every aspect of your day is about someone else. And to come back into our daily life, where, especially in our culture, you're a rugged individualist and that's praised. That being said, I do think that when we see that spark of giving in others, it does inspire it within ourselves. And there's a lot of research in the field of positive psychology that shows that community service, gratitude, all of these things have a significant impact on your perceived well-being, but also on the length of your lifespan, volunteerism being included.
So the Project 360, I really like that entire concept. You have, 3 steps. But at the end of the day, it sounds like it's the same thing that I always advocate for, is veterans need to find their purpose and find their tribe. The 2 things that they had when they were in service, I knew what I was doing. And even if somebody's in a different job or different series or different service, we all sort of understood, like, hey, we're all on the same team. And that's the tribe. And the purpose is I knew what I was doing each day.
Absolutely.
I may not know it specifically, it depends on what's happening, things go, but in general, I knew what I was going towards. When you get out, sometimes that is the biggest 2 things that people are missing, but it sounds like you address that sort of in a step-by-step building manner.
Absolutely. Sort of going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the psychological principle, food and shelter, right? Then we need our emotional needs met, right? We need to feel safe. We need to have our basic needs met. Then we need to have our emotional needs met. Then we need to be productive members of society. And then we can focus on our spiritual well-being. I think that's something that sets us apart as an organization, is we acknowledge the spiritual component, as hoopy doopy wooey wooey that it sounds, right? The human component, the larger life purpose and meaning component that's essential. And I think this is essential for all people, but it's even that more apparent within our veteran population, because they've been in, quite often, life or death situations. Like, truly, no one is more aware of the significance of life than our veteran population. And so when they come back into the mundane, this person just wants their latte, that's the biggest problem. Or often, I don't have a job at all, or I don't have a home at all. it feels that much farther away from
Mhm.
where they used to feel. No matter how bad things were, at least what I did mattered. So I think you're absolutely correct that there is this needing to find your purpose and needing to find your community, and those two elements, they are absolutely related to each other and also need to be addressed in different ways, because those feelings of isolation can come from what we address in our Project 360 program. They can come from the physical disability that has now been experienced. They can come from culturally, especially in places like New York or Connecticut. Culturally, our relationships with veterans is a little strained, honestly. And a lot of veterans that I speak to really feel isolated, treated differently, either glorified, which is its own kind of strange feeling, especially for those who feel like they are not real veterans, is something that I hear a lot, even though they are and they have served, or vilified because, oh, well, all veterans have killed somebody, etc. Like it puts
Right.
that creates this really isolationist feeling. So not only were you removed from your daily group, but now you're back in a society that like kind of treats you separate all the time, almost as if you're a different species of human, when really you're just a human who had a very specific set of experiences.
So you are primarily in New York. Obviously, you don't turn people away. You try to help as much as you can. So you're mostly in New York City, but you mostly all in New York. But that's your base of operations.
Absolutely. So home base is New York City. We're in Astoria, Queens, and we help veterans and get funding to help veterans for all of New York State. But we can help people over the phone, and we often do, and we help people online. We're 24/7 available for anyone.
So let's talk about what defines a veteran, because there's a lot of legalese and there's a lot of reality. I generally put in like, hey, if you went to basic training at some point, or the equivalent, some amount of service you served. But I know some organizations, they support combat veterans or Vietnam veterans or Korean War veterans or what have you. Is there any criteria other than being a veteran?
So for us, we will assist anyone who has any discharge status other than dishonorable. And we've assisted with discharge upgrades in certain situations, et cetera. But for us, that is the only exclusionary factor, is a dishonorable discharge status. Obviously, anything is up for conversation, but that has been a really good baseline for us.
That is a good baseline. It means you were convicted in a court of some very serious felony things.
Exactly.
I was a criminal investigator for the Army, and not a lot of court martials. Let me tell you, folks, if you got a court martial, you earned it.
Yeah, that's really been our experience as well. I'm glad that you said it so that I didn't have to, but
you earned
really
it.
is.
Like I've seen a lot of bad things, but
Yeah.
it's a more forgiving environment than many people think, like, oh, the court martial and they'll do it at the drop of the hat. That may have been true like in the 40s or 50s or 60s or something.
Absolutely.
But nowadays you have to really earn it.
Really, you truly do.
So you're up in New York. Pretty much everybody's a veteran. What are some of the challenges that you face? Obviously, New York City is a different environment. I've only been there a few times, but we have a lot of veterans up in New York. I have a good friend of mine, folks that listen to the show know as Mike. He does one of our podcasts. He's over there in Columbia University, so he has a whole different spin on the veteran thing. He's a Buddhist guy. He's a force of nature, but not everybody's a Mike. So, what are some of the challenges you face, especially or the veterans face up there in New York?
One of the biggest challenges, and I'm sure it comes as no surprise for folks, is housing. Housing is a huge challenge. Affordable, we'll get these notices, for example, affordable housing available, priority to veterans, and the minimum rent is $2,000 a month. It's like,
that's cheap, huh?
That's cheap. Yeah, that's affordable. Certainly affordable. But
Wow.
Also that the housing that is available in these shelter systems is so specific. So we've definitely had veterans turned away from available housing exclusively set aside for veterans because they didn't have a substance abuse problem. That, nope, you have to be a veteran, you have to be this, you have to be that, and you have to have these criteria in order to qualify. And at the end of the day, you're a human being who needs a place to sleep.
I mean,
And
they're like volunteering. Oh, let me go get some heroin real quick.
yeah,
I mean,
exactly. That's exactly. I can start
I
shooting
can
up
help you out
now
here.
if you need it. Exactly. So
That's insane.
that it is insane, but it's a real reality. It's a real reality here in the city, very specifically, and then in other parts of the state, is the city as well. Employment's a big issue because there are a lot of veteran employment opportunities available for
Mhm.
jobs that you would never consider for yourself.
Ah,
Right? We're paying the bare minimum. We're not including any of these experiences. For some reason, there's this mentality that if you served, you were dumb, right?
like a
That you don't
yeah,
have
like you're the
skills.
only thing you're qualified is for a laborer or something.
Exactly. There's a lot of labor. There's a lot, and that's, it's not to say that we don't appreciate the job that's available, but it is to say that don't say that you have a veteran employment opportunity if it's not a job that you would be happy to have for yourself, you know? And one of the things that we try to do is connect people with employers that are going to pay them well and do skilled labor, build on their skill set, but also match their interests. So we have done that through the automotive industry, insurance adjusting. We've done that through the tech industry. We've done that through graphic design, even EMT, et cetera. But that's another big challenge that we face is employment. And now that we're moving into this new world of AI,
Mhm.
it's obviously a problem for us as a collective culture, but very specifically, we've found there are so many predatory, and this has been the case for a long time, predatory schools and predatory employers, truly, who are looking to use the word veteran to support what they're offering. And then when you actually look at what's being offered, it's less than what you would ever offer to any other person. And that
Right.
can be
Like
really
an
hard.
intern off the street would be better served than like, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. There's a bunch of
Exactly.
that. And it takes some vetting and that's time consuming and it's difficult. And it's also like, hey, what's the real purpose here?
Yeah,
Is it just to get the little check mark? Hey, we support veterans, or is it like really an opportunity? You know, it's
definitely.
funny. You were talking about rent and the cost of New York City, and I used to live in DC, and you know it's expensive, but it's not New York City. I recognize that, but it's still kind of crazy to me. But
Absolutely.
my son follows all these Instagram TikToks, and he'll show me these outrageous, you know, little one bedroom with a shared bathroom, and it's $6,000, you know, like for the size of my office here, you know, like to live. And I'm like, how much is it? And he's like, gotta wait. Look, just follow the thing. And it's like $6,000 a month. I don't know about you, but that's incredibly expensive.
It is incredibly expensive.
And
And
it's like nothing. It's like barely a room.
absolutely, absolutely. And in addition, it's not just a single person. We've had veterans who are single parents. And so
Hmm.
they're trying to provide for themselves and their child on a veteran job that's offering less than a livable wage. And so this
Right.
is a real issue, not just for our veteran population, but even for us small nonprofit organizations who also have to pay for an office rent that's increasing every year.
Oh yeah.
And our volunteers who so the way our organization works is our volunteers contribute funds from their personal paychecks to cover the overhead expenses of the organization so that our donors know that the money can go directly to direct impact services. But what that means is our volunteers also are paying that crazy rent and also are
Yeah.
getting less for their money and still contributing. So it's a real concern, I think, for our nation. It's a real concern for our regular folks, but particularly the ones that are hit hardest. But it's sort of like if you imagine reintegration as like you had a really solid job for 6 years and you just got laid off, right?
Hmm.
It's that plus extra, and so having to restart over and not being able to go into your same career field. So when we're
Right.
thinking about veteran reintegration, that really is what it is. Imagine losing your job and not being able to go back into what you know.
And
And
you have to move.
and you have to move, and now you have to live in a brand new city with rent that is 3 times, what it was when you went in.
Oh
It's pretty
yeah. And
crazy.
and the culture is different, the people are different. So let's talk a little bit about your organization. When did you get started?
Yeah.
You know, some of the background. I'm always fascinated by like how these organizations have started. And I'll caveat this. I know you're not a social worker, so I'm not beating up on social workers, but like literally like half of all the organizations that are doing cool stuff, that I've ever talked to, like it's a good 50% are social workers that saw some need and said, I'm going to do this. Equine therapy, art therapy, something.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated, like, where does this come from? How did the organization get started? Like, what was the impetus?
So happy to talk to you about this because it's something that I'm really proud of. I'm really proud to be a part of this organization. Our organization was started in 2011 by co-founders, Dre Popov, Christian Zamora, Mary Kay Satriano. And what the reason why the organization was created is because when these veterans, Marine Corps vets and Army vets, came back from service, went through the hardships of a lot of the same reintegration issues of the time, homeless, jobless, found their way, got back on their feet, and felt this need to just give back, to find purpose again. And when they went to different organizations to serve, they found that nowhere were they actually having an impact. And while they were trying to do this, get their own lives back together, try to find meaning and purpose, year after year, more and more of their brothers and sisters of service committed suicide, until the point where most of them were gone, until the point where more had killed themselves than had died in combat with them. And just
sad number and sad reality.
A sad reality. And the sadder reality is that hasn't really changed. We see numbers, and I can kind of get into that with you later, but the reality is those numbers are just as high as they've ever been, truly. So these three kind of got together and said, well, why didn't we? What was it that prevented us from committing suicide? And they've identified these very specific things, and particularly this element of making a difference. And so this is really the birth of the organization, and through its several years of iteration, eventually the birth of Project 360, identifying these things like, well, I had help here, I got connected here. And the most important part is I was able to make a difference in this way. So the part that they were identified as the most important was being able to positively impact and have a real impact on someone else's life. So our very first mission as an organization was to help build a home for a quadruple amputee, an adaptive home, and raising the money to do it, making sure the materials were there, and getting that home built so that person could live independently. And side to that, also providing a life-saving heart surgery for a girl in Iraq who had been wounded in the crossfires there. So what those two missions did,
very divergent missions. But
what they did is, for those individuals who were leading those missions, made them realize every day that I have is a day that I can continue to make a positive impact. I can change a life. I can still save a life. Nothing can be done, and this is direct quote from our founders, nothing can be done about what happened in war. We can't go back and fix it. We can't change. But I can change and make a difference in this person's life right now in front of me. So what that has turned into now is we identify, it's different for every person. For those who served in Iraq and Fallujah, our missions, our child missions there are what give them that atonement, or what give them that sense of purpose. But for others, it's helping in animal shelters. It's helping children here. It's helping immigrant families. It's helping resettlement of Ukrainians. It's helping rebuild and beautify our neighborhoods. It's being a peer mentor to other veterans. It doesn't really matter. The idea is we rebuild life, both the person who is in the process of rebuilding their own, but through helping others and our communities rebuild theirs as well. So
that's absolutely awesome. I was reading about the missions, and I was like, all right, how do you get there from there? And I think you've summed it up pretty darn well. As you know, as you get healthier, you want to do a thing to sort of ameliorate, fix, get engaged. There's a lot of different reasons why you would want to do that. And it really is up to the individual. I think that's the important part. The real takeaway is, hey, it's not a prescribed course of action. It's a prescribed outcome. Hey, go do the thing that would help you do the thing.
Absolutely. I'll give an example. We were working with a veteran who really needed to rebuild their entire life from scratch. They were homeless, they were jobless, they had lost connections with all of their family. Working with them to get benefits registration, get health care, get therapy, get treatment, get back in school, get a job as an EMT. And then they were at a place where they felt stable, talking about, well, what is it? What is it that's still eating at you?
Mm-hmm.
There were so many children that I saw when I served in Iraq that I couldn't help, that weren't their fault. Oh, well, we have identified this little boy who has a broken femur that has been reset incorrectly. He needs a leg surgery, but he can't get the leg surgery because he has a deformed heart. And all of the medical infrastructure around him has been decimated. So he would have to travel to Jordan in order to get that surgery. And it's going to cost $5,000 that the organization doesn't have. Okay, so I will fundraise that $5,000. He fundraised the $5,000. He provided it. The child was able to get the surgeries. The child didn't want to walk after his surgery and needed motivation. So what we did is connected those two via Zoom. And the vet promised him a little red race car if he did it.
Oh,
so
wow.
The boy started exercising. He was able to get the surgeries, full recovery, healthy. And we were able to send him that little red race car and then show via Zoom that veteran him playing with the red race car.
Isn't that awesome?
It's so awesome. And so what that does for that person is like, I can't fix what I saw or wasn't able to do in that moment, but I'm able to just continue living my life knowing that every interaction is a possibility for me to make the same types of differences that I was able to make when I was serving.
Wow, that I like that. Great. I really love that example because I'm thinking of all my friends and other people that I was in Iraq, I was in Afghanistan, and I have friends that were all the way through. And one of them has been sponsoring his interpreter, with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and and he finally made it to the U.S. and he's been working on that for years, trying to get the Operation Pineapple. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's an effort to help get a lot of our interpreters and other folks that were supporting us out of the country. So they were targeted. And I was thinking about my friend Dan and his, very much effort to make that happen. And the mission satisfaction for him, because we've talked a lot about it. We've chatted a bunch about it and war gamed on how to make these things happen. And it's the same concept, just in a little more probably systematic way. It's always that individual component that goes and does it.
Absolutely.
So you guys have been around since 2011. You've helped lots of people. You have other things besides Operation 360, right?
Yeah, so we do direct impact services, but we also try to meet the needs as they come. So during the pandemic, just like everyone else, we were heavily affected. We shifted our mission. We noticed that the people who were on the front lines, not just our EMTs, not just our doctors and nurses, but our post office workers, our grocery store workers, we lived in the epicenter. I don't know if you remember, but there was a day where we lost 12,000 people in one day. This is where our office is located. This was our neighborhood that lost that number of people during COVID. So we found a PPE manufacturer. We worked with them, and then we went out and did deliveries to our local community workers for that time. So we are mission driven based on the environment that's around us. So we did that. We also, when Ukraine first kicked off and we had a lot of people who needed to evacuate, we helped relocate over 140 families to Canada, to Spain, to the US in that moment. When there was a big resettlement of Afghan after the fall of Kabul, Afghan families, we would help resettle them in Queens. So we have our Project 360, which is full long-standing. We offer our direct impact services, but we're also always trying to make as much of a difference as we can. And the people we use to make that difference are our veteran volunteers, our civilian volunteers, but also the veterans that we've helped. So if you've gone through our program, if you've received our services, you're going to get a text message to say, hey, we need this help. Are you available to help? And that really, it makes a big difference.
I love all these examples. I think that is the most important part because I can look back at my time in the service. I got medically retired. I had been in the Army since I was 17 years old. All of a sudden, I'm mid 30s. And I've been at Walter Reed for a couple of years. And when they say you're getting out on a medical, it's not like a 3-month transition. It's, hey, you're at the hospital, you're being medically retired. And when they give you those orders, you have like 15 days to get a job, because you can't get a job if you don't know when you're going to be available.
Yeah.
You got to find a place to live, all those things. And it only worked because other people were helping me. And that's the only reason it worked. I was newly married, had a son on the way. All of a sudden, the only job I've ever known is gone. The only culture I ever really knew is not there. And I'm like, oh, it's going to be horrible. Turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. In retrospect, but at the time it was absolutely terrifying. And it's only because there were people willing to go out and help me make better decisions and get a job and sort of do those things that it all just came together. But if you miss out that opportunity, that timing isn't right, or just things miss, it could have been a whole different tragic story. And I recognize that. And that's where I think organizations like yours are so important, because
Yeah.
they're there to fill in that gap and meet the veterans where they are.
Absolutely. And I think this is a perfect highlight of the importance of like peer mentorship. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a civilian, I didn't serve, and I dedicate myself to this work because veterans are people who need other people to support them through something. And I remember when I first started volunteering here, the reason I started volunteering here is because I heard members of this organization say the only people who care about veterans are veterans. And I wanted to make sure to be the proof that that statement wasn't true.
See, I know that isn't true, but I know that there is a sentiment about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially if you've interacted with service providers like the VA and not had a good experience, which a lot of our folks haven't, it really does feel that way. In addition, especially our OIF folks had a really hard time when they came back. But that being said, there is still something unique about peer service provision, because it is so helpful to know this person has a shared experience with me. One, I can't bullshit them because they know what my experience actually was. But two, if they were able to navigate it, then I am able to navigate it, right? We have a shared experience. We can understand that you're no better than I am. I'm no better than you are or worse than you are. If you are able to go through this and give me advice along the way, I can hear that. It's just sort of to say, like, listen, you don't have to forge the path yourself. Here's how to get around these real barriers. I think that's so important to the success of folks, right? You're not going for help because you're incapable. You're just doing it a way where you don't have to beat your head against a wall because somebody already found a better way to do it, And I think that resonates so much with folks who have engaged in service, right? Not every person does something completely on your own. That's not the point, right? You have a team.
If you do it on your own, it usually means you're not a great leader or a great follower.
Exactly. So this is no different. You have a team who can lead you through this very complex reintegration process. And really, you still are a cog in the wheel in that sense. You have a shared experience, meaning you're going to have shared hardships when you come home. So that peer service provision, I think, eliminates two things. It eliminates that loneliness, and it also eliminates that victimhood of like, oh, this is just what happens when we come back. It's not the end of everything, and it is possible to get through it and come out stronger and happier, exactly as you said, the best thing that could happen to you.
I've always noticed that I could put a bunch of veterans of any era, any gender, anything, and put them in a room, and within like 10 minutes, they're all chatting. But the inverse of that isn't always true. And I find that sometimes people are like, oh, only veterans understand. No, I don't think that's true. I think that veterans can often have that shared bond very quickly, but sometimes and very often, the other folks that care matter much more than just that status as a veteran. And so it is a challenge sometimes. People, especially people that weren't treated really well, like I'm an anomaly. I totally get it. My experiences with the VA have been awesome. Like I've had the same primary care doctor at the VA since 2009.
You have a primary care doctor at the
VA? I see him every 6 months. I've
That's
had
amazing.
the same doctor since 2009.
Wow, that's incredible.
And it is incredible. And in fact, I live in a very large university hospital town, University of Virginia, and I get care at the UVA hospital quite a bit. But my primary care doctor there changes every 3 or 4 months. Just, there's people on rotation. It's a teaching hospital. I totally get it. But at the same time, that continuity is so important. And so, like, I'm an anomaly. I totally get it. I hear all the horror stories about the VA, but that's all they are is, individual experiences, and learning how to advocate for yourself with the VA is a lot of what we do here at Coming Home Well, because it's like anything in the military. If you know what you want and you prepare the right way, things get a lot easier. But if you just go in, hey, you need to give me this, maybe not, right? So go, guys,
Absolutely.
listen to the shows. We've got all sorts of things about benefits, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here with Damia December, the program director, which is a fancy title for doing everything. No, I'm just kidding. She
Yes,
doesn't do
actually.
everything. The
A lot
chief
of
cook,
things.
bottle washer, organizer. They have a wonderful organization. They're primarily up in New York, but if you need something, reach out to them. Damia, what is the number one most pressing need, challenge that your organization is facing?
I think very similar to every nonprofit organization, our biggest need is a financial one. We are a small but mighty all volunteer force, and we
Mm-hmm.
are literally limited by how much we can pay for in certain circumstances. What I really love about our organization is so much of what we do is person to person, and so much as what we do is based on that volunteer time. What we end up doing in our state compared to other organizations is when a veteran falls through the cracks and says, listen, I've been turned away because I don't have a substance abuse problem or this, that, or the other. We need just this one financial thing. We will do it. We will pay for it. We will make sure that that person has what we need. The buck stops with us. And I'm really proud of that fact. So that's really a huge need. And I think secondarily, I think the other need is really for folks to be aware that these amazing folks are doing this work, and for if folks have ways for veterans to get involved, if they have a job available, if they have a bed available, that counts too. So really it's the resources. And I think that what is wonderful about working at this working with this organization, volunteering here, and the veterans that volunteer here as well, is impossible is not in our vocabulary. And I think you could probably resonate with this as well. Obstacle is just the next task to get done, right? It might
Yeah,
take a
it's the
long
next
time.
thing.
It's the next thing. It's not a permanent barrier, which I
And
think
there's
is really
always
wonderful.
a solution. Sometimes it takes a little while, it takes more phone calls, more of something, but it's totally doable at some point. And I always find that helping veterans is the most easy thing because the needs are usually defined if you help them understand what the need actually is. Uh,
Absolutely.
and sometimes that takes a little bit of teasing out, and that's why I think the Project 360 is so useful with a peer
Absolutely.
mentor about, hey, what is it you actually need? If I asked you today, what do you need? And you're like, oh, I don't need anything, or I need a bed, but really you need a job so you can support yourself. That takes some time and getting to know the person and really understanding what they need. But
Absolutely.
it's no different than we do in the military about knowing your troops and what do they need and what are their goals and what are they trying to accomplish, and sort of like, okay, hey, you might have thought this, but maybe you should try this. Uh,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And so much of those needs assessments are based on a very limited view and awareness of what is
Hmm.
possible, right? I think so much of your time in service is you don't have needs, right? Like you don't have needs. You get done with what you have, and when you come out and you haven't left that frame of reference, and you also things have changed rapidly. You don't know what's possible. A lot of the perception is that healthcare has to be the VA, or
Ooh.
mental health care has to be pills. It has to be,
Hmm.
psychotropic medication. And none of those are true anymore. There's a lot more accessibility. There's a lot more avenues to get well-being. Or even one thing that we do is family mediation, right? That it's not just the veteran who needs to be aware of what the needs are, but it's also their social network and their family who needs to be aware. And one of the things that I do as a civilian is I have conversations with female partners, male partners. I have conversations with employers to put that into a frame of reference, especially for our folks who have combat PTSD or who have TBI, these things that are taboo for the civilian world to talk about. the civilian world has to have a need of like, hey, this is triggering to you because you don't understand the processes. So much of what we do is, and what is needed, as you just said, is just re-education. Even the service connection process, if you knew, hey, step A, talk to this person, step B, talk to this person, step C, let me fill out this form for you, there you go, then you wouldn't have such a difficult time. You wouldn't be popping off, for lack of a better word, the first person you see, you know.
So, Damia, I know I've asked you a lot of questions and we've covered a lot of ground about everything Veterans Rebuilding Life does, but I'm sure there's something I should have asked you but didn't. What should I have asked you?
I think a great question would be, what keeps you going? Right?
That is a great question.
It's hard. It's hard out there. And I think we were having a discussion previously about the work that you do and how it's an uphill battle, and how there are really big fish out there who seem to have a lot of resources and a lot of opportunity, and the need is still present. So what keeps you going? And that's a different answer for everyone. What keeps me going is knowing that every time I finish a task or a promise, every time I keep a promise to the person on the other side of me, whether it's to my fellow volunteers, whether it's to a veteran that I'm helping, that I have just made that possibility for them to hope for the next day. That everything that I do, no matter how small, if I kept my word, it plants a seed of possibility and hope. And that is the core, I think, for all change for all of us. That's how we make a better world. So that's what keeps me going. I think what keeps a lot of our core volunteers going through the ups and downs, through COVID, for hardship, through crazy rent, is that knowledge that the next thing you do could really change a person's life, saves a person's life, make our world better.
Man, what an inspirational answer. I think that's the most inspirational answer to that question I've ever had. Damia, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well. I'm going to leave you with the last thing. Was there anything else? Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. How do people get in touch with you?
Oh, yes. Okay. You can get in touch with us at our website, vrlnyc.org or veteransrebuildinglife.org. They go to the same place. You can also shoot us an email at info@vrlnyc.org as well.
Hey, folks, if you're driving, if you're listening to the podcast while you're out and about, we're going to put it in the show notes so you'll be able to write it down or copy it. You won't have to listen and write it down, but we'll make sure they're in the show notes as well. Damia, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well. I'm so impressed with your organization, and I really like the sort of can-do, fill in the gaps, make sure that people are not losing out on the things that they should be able to access just because they didn't know about it or didn't know how to get to it. Because that happens a lot. I see it so often. Sometimes you just don't have that advocate that's there in your corner to help you or show you the way.
Absolutely.
And even with the best of education and opportunities, I meet veterans all the time that have no idea about the new benefits or how to access education or fill in the blank, even get benefits, because there's a lot of detail to it. It's usually not that hard, but there's a lot of detail, and you sort of need to go and fill in the forms the right way and have this and have that. And if you just expect somebody else to do it, no one else is going to do it except if you're working with somebody.
Definitely. And that is
looking out for you.
Definitely. That's one of the things that we can assist with as well and are trained to assist with. But I think we had spoken just really briefly before. So many veterans don't even know that they're veterans. They are service members. That I'm not that type of veteran. Oh, and often the ones who would say I'm not that type of veteran are probably the ones with the most need and just not in that mindset that's them. And what I would say is, if you are a service member and if you are not living a life that you would say is thriving, if you are not feeling like you're making a difference in this world, if you feel like you are not being the best version of yourself, then just have a conversation. We're here to help you be the best version of yourself so that you can help others be the best version of themselves. And sure, maybe service connection is a part of that along the way. But I think rather than framing it as like, oh, am I in worse enough need to have help? and reframing it of, am I living my best possible life, making the most difference I can make? And that's really where we want to really get folks. You're not a victim. You're just on a journey towards becoming the best possible, most impactful version of yourself.
No, that's a great way to look at it. And that's a reframing for a lot of people. You've really nailed it, where some people are like, oh, I'm not really a veteran. And you find out they're in 10 years and we're in combat 4 times. And yeah, no. And this is the reality. Nobody brags about being, the quartermaster or these really important, essential jobs, but that all counts. That's the reality. It's you go to the local VFW and the old joke is, there was 1,000 SEALs in Vietnam over the many years, and I've met 5,000 of them. Yeah. Nobody, but it's the other folks. The reality is there's a lot of people who serve that are eligible for these things. And if you're not living your best life, hey, go get some help, go talk to people, find out what it is that maybe you don't even know what you need. Yeah. And I think that's a real great takeaway.
Absolutely. And maybe what you need is some direction on how to give back. And I think that's where you are, giving back.
Finding your purpose and finding your tribe, right?
Exactly. 100%.
Folks, we've been talking with Damia December, Program Director for Veterans Rebuilding Life. We'll have all the links and the phone numbers and everything in the show notes. But Damia, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well. And thank you again for everything that you do for our veterans.
Oh, thank you so much for having me as well. And thank you for giving me this platform to speak about the amazing work of our organization and our volunteers, and just having another entry point to connect with veterans and their families and their loved ones and their community and my community.
Thanks again.
No worries. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us this week on Coming Home Well with Dr. Tyler Piron. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well, this is Coming Home Well.